Dear friends, good evening. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this week. This is your channel, Gnosis Arizona. And tonight, let's talk a little bit about the planets and you. Let's be more specific. How is it that the planets shape our personality? Let's dedicate the few following minutes so that we can understand how is it that these planetary influences help structure our personality throughout different stages in our lives. This is important because we can use this not only to understand the circumstances around us, but also it's a better way to relate to others, to relate to our parents, to our family members, to our children, and when it comes to our children, to help educate them in the right path as they are developing their own personality, how the planets shape the personality. To start with this, let's go a little bit back in time and speak about this man on the right hand on the screen. His name is George Lakhovsky. Lakhovsky was a Russian engineer, Russian scientist. He's also an author. He is credited with writing the book, The Secret of Life, in which he speaks about cosmic rays and the radiation that living beings, living organisms irradiate, and how those radiations have the ability to create an influence. His studies on this were so profound that he ended up being the inventor of something that is called the multiple wave oscillator. And when it comes to this particular invention, that it has been said to operate with Tesla generators, this was described as a device that had been used by him in the treatment of illnesses like cancer. But Lakhovsky also spoke of something else. And he spoke about the correlation that he noticed that existed between solar activity, namely sunspots, and the effect in the human psyche resulting in wars. Lakhovsky, through his work, comes to show that living organisms respond to different strengths and forces of radiation. But he was not the only one to do this. There is also George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Likely, if you have been a student of these esoteric studies, you have heard about the name of Gurdjieff and you have heard about Uspensky. And Gurdjieff spoke about a cosmic law that is known as the cosmic law of the Solionensius. This law is a law that speaks of a cyclical period, meaning a cycle that repeats itself every so often, where planets experience some sort of electromagnetic tension that sparks unusual solar activity. And as a consequence, the solar activity influences the psyche of creatures and human beings, resulting in events. In his writings, he stated, "It is necessary to know a great deal in order to understand that. What is war? It is the result of planetary influences." And here to give you some visual on what is this cosmic law of the Solionensius, we will speak about the solar system of Baleoto, that is a solar system sister to our solar system of Ors. On the image, what we see are the stars that make up the constellation of the Pleiades. The blue hue that you see around these central suns and each one of these solar systems is a visualization on the radioactive field that exists surrounding them. This is that energy that emanates from them, and of course it includes the energies that come from the other organisms that exist within each one of those solar systems, namely the planets of each one of these stars. But this solar system of Baleoto, again a solar system sister to our solar system of Ors, exerts a magnetic tension with our own sun. This tension becomes kind of a strain between the two solar systems. And as our sun experiences that strain, it invites certain solar activity from the sun itself. This event prolongs itself, it sustains itself for periods of time. And as we human beings experience the strain, what we feel on the inside, what our psyche comes to experience, is a longing for freedom. Now you can imagine that there are two aspects to everything according to the Hermetic principle of polarity. One aspect of that longing for freedom will be one that is external, where we see circumstances, conditions, causes affecting our lives, and we feel oppressed by them, and we want to rebel against them. But there is also a manifestation that can happen inwardly. And inwardly, that longing for freedom means that these are cosmic energies available to us, that when we know how to employ them, we can use them for our internal liberation. Relevant to these planetary influences, relevant to these cosmic influences, what does Samael tells us? He says, in this epoch of cosmic drone rockets, detailed studies have been made of cosmic rays and their influence on living cells and organisms in general. We cannot deny the radioactivity of the planets in space, much less their electromagnetic influence on living organisms. Friends, the last time that we experienced a Solionensius was a little more than 100 years ago. And back on the year of 1917, when these activities, solar activities, were taking place and humanity was moving with this longing for freedom, for liberty, inviting a revolution. That revolution was manifested externally, resulting in the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution. This knowledge is not just discussed in any esoteric circle. This knowledge is also well shared with our modern day science. And there is an article from Charles Choi, a contributor into space.com, that he says, even small changes in solar activity can impact Earth's climate in significant and surprisingly complex ways. Outside in our planet, we have the elements of fire, air, water, and earth. And within us, as a microcosmic creature, we have within us these atomic manifestations of earth and water and fire and air itself. When these changes in solar activity take place, not only they affect the planet, they affect you and me, each one of us individually. For example, speaking of planet Earth has its own counterweight. The counterweight, planet Earth, is the moon. And the moon goes through a series of changes. These are cyclic changes. Many years ago, perhaps your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they were related with work that would happen outdoors. And they would till the land and they would work with wood and etc. Our ancestors, when it came to working with wood, they knew exactly when to go and trim the trees, when to take wood from the trees in such a way that the wood would last for centuries. They knew exactly which phases of the moon were the ones most auspicious to plant seeds and which phases of the moon were the most auspicious to harvest. Today, in an industrialized world as we have today, none of that is important. What is important is how much can be made. So we just go and plant and we just go harvest as much as we can so that we can make, well, the most profit. Lamentably, that is the situation. But that was not always the case. Our ancestors used to make use of these cosmic forces for the benefit of everything that they did. And beyond that, well, the moon is also responsible for the rise and the fall of tides. It is responsible for the emergence and the retreat of certain illnesses. It is responsible for influencing the cycles in many women. So as we see these influences, we must understand that the moon, being considered a quote-unquote planet, meaning a celestial body or a body that wanders through space, well, that moon has an influence over us. And if these influences happen on tides and water, on seeds and their growth and development and their death, well, evidently it also affects our own waters and the seeds that exist within each one of us. And the nexus, the link, is one that is energetic. And that is because you and me, we have these three things within each and every one of us, which are an ego, an essence, and the personality. The essence is what Samael refers to in his writings as the psyche or the psychic material. He speaks of it as the consciousness. Actually, he refers to the essence in many different ways. But the essence, nevertheless, is that divine material that exists within each and every one of us. That when we work it correctly, it empowers us in such a way to develop what is known as a solar soul, a radiant soul. This psyche, this essence, is the most divine aspect that exists within each and every one of us. As a matter of fact, it is this essence, this consciousness, the only thing that today we have incarnated from our divine being, from our innermost. That is the essence. And with it, existing potentiality, all of the attributes, all of the powers, all of the virtues, all of the abilities of our being. And we must develop them. But then there is the ego. And the ego, well, because the consciousness is a fraction of the human soul of our innermost, we have used that consciousness and created many things in this life and in past lives. And most of those creations, the most pervasive ones, are our psychological aggregates, these egos. And within each one of our many egos, whether it's anger or lust or greed or gluttony or laziness, etc., each one of these egos has a fraction of that essence trapped inside. So we not only exist carrying our essence, our sense of being, our personality walking around this earth, within the ego is also carried a fraction of our consciousness. But the ego and the essence, well, they have a need for something to be able to interact with the environment, and thus the personality. The personality is an energetic vehicle that we create in every life. And it is the energetic vehicle that allows us to interact with the environment that surrounds us, interact with other people, interact with other personalities. And as an energetic vehicle, the personality is subject to the influence of many other different energies. Some of them of low impact energies, like the thoughts of others, the sentiments and the emotions of others, and other energies with much greater impact, like solar flares, solar winds, the planetary influences of what we will refer to from this moment forward as the 7 planets of alchemy. These 7 planets in our solar system are not just physical bodies, rocks with multitudes of minerals, and in some cases, waters and gases, etc., that orbit around the sun. These planets are living organisms, and like everything else that exists, they also have an essence. They also have a consciousness. The thing is that the consciousness of a planetary body is of many orders of magnitude more developed than the consciousness that exists within the microcosmic man. And each one of these planets has a soul, a solar, radiant soul. Each one of these planets has a soul that is known as one of the 7 archangels. If we go from left to right on the screen, planets like the moon and Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, well, the respective souls are Archangel Gabriel for the moon, Archangel Raphael for Mercury, Archangel Uriel for Venus, Archangel Michael or Michael for the sun, Archangel Samael for Mars, Archangel Zachariel for Jupiter, and ultimately Archangel Orifiel for the planet Saturn. So these 7 planets, we should look at their influence not as the influence of a massive planetary body that exerts some gravitational push or pull, but rather as the influence of a cosmo creator, of a solar soul that is responsible for certain aspects of the existence of the crafting of this universe in which you and I exist. These planets have a very distinct influence over our psyche and our personality as it develops. And we start with the moon. The archetype of the moon is Archangel Gabriel. And Gabriel, being that angel that is associated with the Annunciation, it is the one that presents himself before Mary and tells her, behold, congratulations, you will be the mother of the Savior of the world. You can then imagine that Archangel Gabriel has a profound influence in our psyche when it comes to all things maternal. The moon not only helps us with the processes of conception, because the angels under the hierarchies of Archangel Gabriel are known as the angels of life, and they are responsible for the connection of the zoosperm with the ovum in the womb. Gabriel, from that moment forward, influences the development of our personality and promotes the growth and development of our personality between the ages of 0, that means at the time of conception, all the way to the age of 7. And there's a lot of years. In this cycle of 7 years between conception and the age of 7, there is a lot that happens with that child. As children, we go through numerous experiences at that stage of our lives. And all of those experiences are responsible for helping create a basic model of our personality. To this effect, Samael says, the child learns more by example than by precept. We all learn more by what others demonstrate than what they say. We know this. The wrong way of living, the absurd example, and the degenerate customs of the elders give the child's personality this skeptical and perverse tint peculiar to the times in which we live. So what does that mean? Friends, that means that during the ages of 0 to 7, when we are creating our personality, when we grow in an environment where we are subjected to violence, when we are spanked, whether it is with a bare hand or with a kitchen spatula or with a chancla or with a belt or with anything else, well, as we get beaten, have discipline forced into us, our personality starts developing within the framework of pain, of resentment, and hatred. If we as parents are growing our children between the ages of 0 and 7, and we are subjecting them to an environment of violence, whether it is physical, emotional, or psychological violence, those children will all grow and develop a personality within a framework of pain, resentment, and even hatred towards us, the parents. If when we are living at home, we are exposing our child to all of these scenes of infamy, they affect the children to their core. And these influences can be catastrophic for the children's personality. So what is the antidote for this? As parents, we must then help these children create a personality in an environment that is safe and sound. We should start creating an environment where children start having an experience of learning their first words, their first letters, in such a way that learning for them becomes a delicious and happy experience, so that they can move on in life with maintaining a good sense of alert novelty, of alert perception, where they would consistently be looking at things around them as new, with an eye for discovery, not with an eye of suspicion, not with an eye of resentment, definitely not, with seeds of fear. It is our responsibility as parents to create an environment that is entirely nourishing for these children. This is what happens between the ages of 0, the time of conception, and the ages of 7. And once we turn 7 years old, we let go of the hand of Archangel Gabriel, and we then hold the hand of Archangel Raphael, because we transition from a lunar influence to an influence that is that of Mercury. And everyone who has been familiar with a little bit of astrology knows that Mercury influences the psyche in such a way that it influences intelligence and it influences the intellect. During the ages of 7 to 14, which is that second septenary of our development, the influence is entirely mercurial, and the child, being under the influence of Raphael, whose name means the wisdom of God, is then like a dry sponge, ready to absorb everything that comes their direction. And because the essence in that child is still pure, well, there is no discrimination between what is useful and what is not. The child will absorb with no filter and will learn everything that they can learn. And they, by doing so, put a big responsibility on us. When we as parents start raising children in homes where all that they get exposed to are just violent movies, movies that show murders and lustful images and betrayals and things of the sort, these are then the attributes that the child starts learning and reliving in their fantasies. As we were growing up, well, it was common for us to sit and watch movies and see violent movies where there was always a dark character, some kind of thief or criminal, and then there was some hero, whether a hero with superpowers or with a superior degree of intelligence, and they will clash and we will absorb those images and relive them to play them later as embodying a policeman or somebody else being a thief, and we would shoot each other and make pretend that we were shot. That is the kind of environment in which we grew. So when we're doing this, we are exposing the child not only to all of these seeds of violence in such a way that as they go into their own solitude and privacy, they learn to relive all of these fantasies as if these were normal actions, as if this is what were expected of any human being. And on top of that, there's music. Samael says, it is absurd to nurture the childish personality with arrhythmic, inharmonious, vulgar music. He says, it is stupid to nurture the personality of children with tales of thieves and policemen, with scenes of vice and prostitution, with dramas of adultery, of pornography, etc. Because this is what the child will take and will seek to replicate at some point. But this is only on the music that we may allow our children to listen to. This actually goes beyond the movies and the TV that they can watch in the living room of our homes. The dramas that we bring about in the home, they have a profound impact on the psyche of the child between the ages of 7 and 14 years of age. And if at home, the dramas and the scenes that we are creating are violent because there are arguments between the father and the mother, between the parents. If there is physical violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, these all start complementing the personality of the child. It is indeed unfortunate that there are many parents that will whip their children, that will beat them up, that would insult their children with decomposed and cruel words. Because these are words that the child will carry as a scar in their personality throughout the rest of their lives. So what is the antidote? The antidote here is that it is important that we know that both gentleness and severity must be in balance at the home. Mercy and justice are two pillars in the tree of life. Intelligence and wisdom are part of those two pillars in the tree of life. At home, the father represents the severity. The mother represents that gentleness, represents that love. This does not mean that the father is unable to give love. That does not mean that. But as a representation of this masculine and feminine principles, the father represents severity, the mother brings about that gentleness. When the mother is the one who harms the child, who beats the child, who insults the child, the trauma is even more complex because she is meant to be a symbol of that gentleness. So we as parents, we must bring about that balance in those two plates in the scales of justice in the home. And why should there be balance? Because if in the home all that we have is gentleness and there is no application of discipline, what will happen is that the personality of the child will grow in such a way that it will be delinquent. It will be able to do whatever it wants, not understanding the concept of consequence, and will result in criminal delinquency later. If, on the other hand, everything that exists in the home is severity, where everything that is applied is justice, that imbalance leads the personality of the child to grow in an environment that is despotic in nature, tyrannical. And that is what that personality will know, to be abusive, to be unforgiving. No, there must be a balance between justice and mercy. And the parents together must work not only to avoid all of these dramas from the ages of 0 to 7, but to continue the development of the child to the age of 14 with that harmonious balance where one complements the other. As this happens, the personality of the child grows in the best available environment and circumstances. And for those of us or of a masculine biological composition. It is in this age between 7 and 14 where there is a second layer, a second testicular layer that starts getting formed, that starts releasing certain hormones in the body that start defining the sexuality of the creature. It is during this time where we start seeing that new human that is now walking the face of the earth, well, it starts defining itself more as a masculine or a feminine nature. But when we get to the age of 14, at that moment, we let go of the hand of Archangel Raphael, and we then hold the hand of Archangel Uriel. It is during the age of 14 to 21 where we go into our third septenary of existence, into the third septenary of the development of our personality. And this third set of 7 years is influenced by the planet Venus. The archetype of Venus is Archangel Uriel. And Uriel, if we were to translate it, it would mean something like the love of God. Knowing that we have this Venusian influence, it is in those ages, as a young teenager all the way up to the age of 21, where we start feeling the sting of love. We start becoming attracted to other people. And in those attractions, they start happening because at the age of 14, we start seeing the development in men of a third testicular layer that is now capable of producing zoosperms. In the case of the woman, well, the activity that is taking place in the ovaries will start defining more that body as the body of the eternal feminine, as one that is meant to be a point of reception, while the body of the man is become to be one that projects and that emits. And so, because there is one that is inherently seeking to project and another one that is inherently seeking to receive, those two forces will come together. And in those first unions, well, we start noticing that there starts existing a sexual attraction. And with the sexual attraction, well, there's evidently a topic of sexuality that must be discussed. To this, in his writing, Samael says, the time has come to definitely abandon the false modesty and prejudices related to the sexual problem. It is necessary to understand the sexual problem of adolescents of both sexes clearly and precisely. At 14 years of age, sexual energy appears in the organism of the adolescent, which then flows overwhelmingly through the neurosympathetic system. Friends, the neurosympathetic system is the combination of the central nervous system, the elements of the central nervous system, particularly the brain and the spine, together with the spinal fluid that is shared, and the grand sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. These two nervous systems, one of them is responsible for fighting and fleeing, and the other one for resting and digesting. And this energy is actively flowing through these systems. This emergence of the sexual energy is important because our bodies are laboratories that take gross matter in the form of food and will process it in different stages and in different levels, resulting in the most subtle of substances. I mean, we consume meat and cereals and grains and vegetables. And the combination of all those things leads the body to manufacture something that is blood. And that all happens through different stages in different ways. Besides that, our body also fabricates hormones. neurochemistries, etc. And one of these subtle energies that flow through the body are the result of a crystalline liquid that exists both in men and women. This crystalline liquid was discussed by all of the ancient great alchemists. Alchemists like Raymond Lulio, like Nicholas Flamel, Paracelsus, spoke of this as the entity of the seed. That entity of the seed is the ens seminis that we find in all of these ancient writings. And because this energy is flowing, it is because this substance now becomes available within the human machine for it to be used as a source of energy that can be transmuted for our internal transformation, for our morphing into beings of a greater nature. If we were to speak in an evolutionary scale, this is the energy, the water that can be transmuted so that it can take us into the next step of that cosmic evolution, out of this human dense form into a human angelic form. This ens seminis exists both in men and in women. And the ens seminis cannot be confused with sperm. The ens seminis is the water in which the zoosperm navigates. So with the man and the woman, the young boy, the young girl having this water available, what does Samael say? He says that liquid glass, that flexible, malleable liquid that exists now in our constitution, contains in potential form all the germs of life. Gnosticism recognizes in the sperm, in this ens seminis, the chaos from which life vehemently emerges. But traditionally, we have thankfully come into a state in our human development where we can speak about these sexual matters with a little bit more confidence and a little bit more freedom. But that was not the case of our elders as they emerged from the era of Pisces, and we moved into the era of Aquarius. With Puritanism and with many other preconceived notions and shames, etc., related to sexuality, the speaking of the sexual problem was very, very difficult. And it resulted in many problems with many nefarious consequences. Unfortunately, when the sexual energy appears at the time in which the adolescent is developing himself, we still have some parents, some teachers that are falling back to silly morality codes, and they choose to stay criminally silent about how to best use these forces, about how to help guide this young human who is growing and still developing their personality in such a way that they can use these energies in a way that is edifying and dignifying to the consciousness. So what happens when we as parents remain quiet, when we don't speak about the consequences of abusing of the use of these waters? When the teachers that have a second opportunity to see the students and to observe many of the conflicts that they start having as they start moving in their social circles, when they are unable to understand what's happening, to explain how to best make use of these creative energies, there would be perverts that show up. There will be opportunists that will take advantage and capitalize on the moment and consume the mind of that adolescent, giving them the wrong guidance, inviting them to do things that are inferior in nature. And when the child is looking for direction, when they are seeking to satisfy that need to comprehend what is happening within them, if they have grown in an environment at home in which they have created seeds of fear, and they're seeing the products of fears, of resentments, of hatred. They will not ask their parents. They will go ask their inexperienced friends, and then the inexperienced friends become counselors. So everyone ends up being misled. Everyone ends up being more confused. We, as parents, must educate our children on the problem that comes from abusing of our sexual energies from an early age. First of all, because within the masculine constitution, when the adolescent starts abusing of their creative organs and they start experiencing the orgasm from very early in their teenage years, they are expelling from the body a substance that is not yet fully developed. And rather than taking this creative energy and transforming it in such a way that it can help them grow and develop the abilities, powers, faculties of the 7 magnetic centers of the 7 chakras. These are faculties like telepathy and clairvoyance, the magic ear, inspiration, intuition, imagination, dominion over the elements of water, air, fire, earth. Instead of developing those abilities, the energy is just being expelled and wasted. And the child is polarizing then himself, herself, in the experience of sensation. And rather than having a balance between sensation and satisfaction, they throw themselves into the precipice of instantaneous gratification. Every time expelling these waters, making the availability of these waters less within their constitution, forcing the body to produce more of this, and moving in life in a way that is not setting them, has not set us, to be immediately triumphant. How can we educate our young teens to sublimate these sexual creative energies at such a young age? Because we're speaking from 14 to the age of 21. Friends, we must start with our adolescents, educating them to cultivate their aesthetic sense. This means we must educate our adolescents to live a life that is a rich interior life. And there are many ways in which they can channel this energy so that this energy, this force, is adequately transmuted. We see this when we interact with nature. It could be out on hikes. It could be working in a garden. It could be working with pets. It could be in activities of service to others. It could be in artistic expressions like writing poetry, writing books, like painting, dancing. All of these things together allow for these creative energies and to sublimate them in a way that helps develop abilities and faculties that are all in tune with the abilities and capabilities of their physical bodies. As we are doing this, this human that grows is growing in a very good balance between sensation and satisfaction. They start building an inner, rich life of respect, courtesy, kindness, sacrifice for others, veneration to nature, veneration of all things that are indeed sacred. But then we get to the age of 21. By the time that we let go of the hand of Archangel Uriel, we then come to hold the hand of Archangel Michael. And Michael is the archetype of the sun. Michael, whom like God. That is what Michael means. And this period in which we move from the influence of Venus now becomes a period of 3 septenaries. Our space under the sun is a period of 21 years, 3 stages of 7 years. So from the age of 21 until the age of 42, we are under a solar influence. These 21 years, they're divided in periods of 7. The youth period is 2 periods of 7 years. So between the ages of 21 to 35, we are a young adult. And we must apply the fundamentals of this Gnostic education, because that is what truly edifies and dignifies that creature. It is during this period in which we must learn to be very measured with the consequence, the use of our words, the consequence of our actions. If we grow between 14 and 21, developing that aesthetic sense, the perspective in life between 21 and 35 is dramatically different, because there is a profound sense of respect, self-respect, and respect for others. And we start seeing that everything that we start overdoing in our youth, every abuse that we commit during the time of our youth, between 21 and 35, is a note that we're going to have to bill against our old age a little bit later. And what is key here is that we may think, well, but we're so young. I mean, we're a child at 21, between 21 and 35. But let me give you some perspective. Of all of the great human actions, most of those have started before the age of 30. And I have plenty of examples here to share with you. I mean, there is Yuri Gagarin, was a Russian cosmonaut. He was the first person in outer space at the age of 27. There was Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, she led the French in a revolt against the English occupation when she was 17 years old. Michelangelo, he completed 2 of his most famous sculptures, Pieta, which means piety, and the David. He chiseled those in stone by the age of 29. You can see an image of Pieta right there on the screen. The great master Yeshua ben Pandira, Jesus, he did all his teaching, all of his preaching, all of his healing of the sick before he was 30. Alexander the Great, he conquered countries, empires, at the age of 18. Caesar, Augustus Caesar, he became a Roman senator at the age of 20. I mean, we have scientists like Blaise Pascal. In the 17th century, he developed a calculator at the age of 19. Mozart wrote his first symphony at 8. Alexander Hamilton, he was Washington's aide-de-camp at the age of 22. Many of us are in our 50s. Some of us in our 40s. Our achievements, they're not even close to these types of achievements, you see? So there is so much potential, provided that we make the right use of this creative power that exists within us. Samael tells us by the age of 30, men and women have already lost all of their liveliness and enthusiasm. Lamentably, that is the case for many young people that we see today. And if they fall in their first undertakings, filled with pessimism, they just abandon the game. They just give up. And we see them at work. And they say, this is just a job. It's more of this. How is your day going? Same old, same old. No. There is so much divine potential within each and every one of us. We, all of us, we have the opportunity to transform ourselves and transform the world if we were able to follow these tenets of this fundamental education. So as we see our younger counterparts, let's encourage them. Let's encourage them in ways that they can edify and dignify that divine material that exists within them, so that they can live life to their best and possible ways. Because we all know that youth, that is a period that goes away so fast. If we live our young years between 21 and 35 as a young adult, wasting all of these vital values, engaging in the vice of alcohol and lewdness and abusive sexuality, if we remain interested in fornication, in the pleasures of all kinds, we're going to end up being slaves of our own pleasures. Because you and I, we both know that no pleasure lasts long enough. And as a consequence, they're going to seek to push away into a vague, mysterious future any opportunity for marriage. And if they get married, they may get married out of curiosity. Maybe some of them will get married because of financial interests. I mean, in this early youth, what should we do? How should we then encourage those that have the opportunity to still be at those stages of development in their lives? We must encourage them, educate them on how to eradicate their anger, how to eliminate these psychological aggregates of anger, of jealousy, and fear. Because the ego will justify all of its jealousies. I mean, jealousies are never born out of love. Jealousies exist only because there has been fear in each and every one of us. And it could be fear of life, it could be fear of loss, it could be fear of failure, it could be fear of hunger, it could be fear of being in misery, it could be so many fears, it could be all of those fears together. So we cannot stand by and say nothing, do nothing, and allow these young friends growing up confusing love with passion. Because it has been written, passion is a poison that deceives the heart. They must learn to distinguish between passion and love so that, should they choose to move into a life of marriage, that they know exactly how to be able to live that life. And for the children that come out of that marriage, to educate them in such a way that they satisfy the needs of that lunar period, of that Mercurian period, of that Venusian period, so that they become more than sufficiently capable adults by the time that they turn 21, as those children in the future will grow. But then we go into that later stage in the era of the sun, from the ages of 35 to 42. For those of us who are in that stage, we must continue working in the dissolution of our ego. Anything that has to do with gluttony, with laziness, with pride, we must get rid of that. Anything that has to do with our lust, anything that has to do with our anger, we have to continually seek to observe, comprehend, and eliminate methodically. And of course, because at this age, 33, 35, 31, many of us already have children. We must start encouraging them to understand their own children. For us, understand our own children, see in which stage of development that personality is, so that we understand the influences that they are experiencing. And if you have kids, friends, if you have a daughter, allow her to have a boyfriend. Look back into your life, to your thoughts, into your sentiments, the way that you have expressed before towards women, and see that now your daughter is on that receiving end. Let's educate our daughters in ways that are superior. And let's allow her to have a boyfriend. But also, allow your children to have parties at your home, to have family parties, to have decent dances, to listen to good music. Take your children in good field trips. Because healthy distractions, they do not harm anyone. And for you, who are heads of household, know this. At this age, between 35 and 42, have a good profession. Have a humble trade. For as long as we can provide to support our family, to support our children, that is what is important. All of these external illusions, all of these external fantasies of wealth and riches and social status, these are all lies. All that is needed is that we can provide enough to support our wife, our children. Let's embrace that. Now, some young women, for those of you who are listening, some young women are eager to find a man in their lives, potentially a husband. And they will plaster makeup in different ways on their faces, many instances in very exaggerated ways. Samael says they will pluck their eyebrows, curl their hair, put on wigs, false eyelashes. Samael says these women do not understand manly psychology. We can tell you this. One thing that we admire is the natural beauty and the ingenuous smile of a beautiful woman. And all women are beautiful. All of these extra efforts into exalting or magnifying the beauty, it's not that necessary. Now, men want to see in women sincerity, simplicity, true and disinterested love. They want to see in that embodiment of the eternal feminine, the naivety of nature. And it is important that ladies who would like to get married, that they understand the psychology of the masculine, of the male sexuality. Because it is really not that complicated. So now that we have said that, we flow through those 21 years and we are meant to define our place under the sun. That means that we would have worked to eliminate actively these psychological aggregates that exist within us. It means that we would have been able to connect in a way that is more profound, more intimate. It means that as we bring children into the world, that we would be educating these new souls as they go through their lunar, mercurial, Venusian stages in ways that are superior. These are children that will definitely be more capable. So what is it that life holds in store for us? At the age of 42, we let go of the hand of Archangel Michael and we hold on to the hand of Archangel Samael. Archangel Samael is the archetype of Mars. And as you know, among the Greek gods, Mars was the god of war. So it is during these next 7 years, between the ages of 42 to 49 years of age, that we must go through the harshest conflicts in our lives. And we have an opportunity. We can go through many adverse circumstances and difficult situations between the ages of 42 and 49 and complain every minute of it. Or we can embrace them and we can make the best of all this time. Because it is between the ages of 42 to 49 that you and I pay our karmas. Samael says, after 42 years, that is, after the solar influence has passed, during which we must conquer our little position in the light of the sun, we enter the age of Mars, which goes from 42 to 49. Those who ignore these cosmic cycles repeating themselves in the microcosm of man undoubtedly do not know how to take advantage of the cycle of Mars and come to create a miserable old age. Friends, between the ages of 42 and 49, we come to pay our karmas. You will see through your experience, and you will see because you have witnessed it in someone else, that between these ages, many people lose their jobs. They come across some very terrible illnesses. They go through divorce. They go through tremendous hardships. This is meant not to be a punishment, but a medicine that is given to the soul. Karma is the medicine that we give, that we receive when we most need it. So our middle age, back in the stage of the sun, begins at the age of 35. That middle age ends at the age of 56. In between, we go through this Martian period between 42 and 49, and we must know during that time how to govern our home. We must know how to guide our children. Because the man who does not form his home and his fortune during his youth and middle age ends up living as a failure. Our biggest challenge during this time will be the egos of greed. We may be too distracted, looking to the left and the right and seeing all of these false illusions on how wealth must materialize and how we should live and the things that we should have and how we should present ourselves in society, and that would be such a distraction. Let's not forget that we have basic needs: bread, clothing, and shelter. Once those three things are satisfied, everything else is completely optional. That is the core of our needs: bread, clothing, and shelter. So for us to demonstrate that we know how to govern our home as parents, how is it that we must guide our children? Let's make a sincere effort so that we can be understanding and intelligent about life. Never be a glutton. Do not be a drunkard. Do not be a tyrant. With this person that you are living your life with, create the perfect balance between severity and gratefulness, between severity and mercy. Be that, and your children will imitate your example. So again, it is during these ages of 42 to 49 that we pay our karma. The best thing, let's not complain about the karma that we are paying, because we earned it with our actions in all of our past lives. We receive it, we make the most of it, we seek to understand what is the cause of whatever it is that you would call a quote-unquote misfortune, and work to change that cause. You change that cause, you modify the cause, you modify the effect. And by the time that we turn 49, and you go through all those hardships, and you emerge triumphant, you let go of the hand of Samael, and you hold on to the hand of Archangel Zachariel. Zachariel is he, or the man, the great man who guards the well of the wisdom of God. Zachariel is Zeus. He is the father of the gods. And it is during the ages of 49 to 56, notice, another septenary, that Jupiter enters in our lives, and it rewards all of the work that we have done in those past 49 years of age. So if you have earned the scepter of the kings, you will get that scepter. If you have earned the rod of the patriarchs, you will get that rod. If you have lived a life that is inferior, it's going to be difficult for you to earn the cornucopia of abundance. The better we live our life in those first 49 years, the greater is the reward that Zachariel gives the sincere seeker. So as we're living this, how do we best express our lives? We must show responsibility, but the responsibility that comes from being a father, a mother, the responsibility of a wife, responsibility taught to our sons, to our daughters. We must instill in them a high sense of responsibility to be chaste. That means to be honorable with our sexuality, self-respect with the use of our sexuality, to be sober, not a drunkard, to be temperate, to be virtuous. When we live a life where we show a high sense of responsibility, where we are sexually responsible, sober, temperate, virtuous, we are respected by our family, we are respected by people all around us. But at this time, we must understand that youth is something that has passed. And we must continue working with intensity between those ages of 49 to 56 before old age arrives. Because the moment that we get to 56, we let go of the hand of Zacariel and we hold on to the hand of Archangel Orifiel. And Archangel Orifiel is the angel of death. Orifiel is the ancient Kronos of those Greek-Roman traditions. That does not mean that we are meant to die at the age of 56. No. What that means is that between the ages of 56 to 63, we are walking hand in hand with the Ancient of Days. And this indicates that we must start making ourselves ready to make that transition. I mean, some people live past 80. Some people live up to 100. Some people have lived beyond 100. Those previous cycles of the moon and Mercury, they'll come to repeat themselves once again once we are done with this cycle at 63. That is true. But for us, it demands from us a higher degree of responsibility. Samael says, old age proper begins at the age of 56. And this is so true that even in the collective subconsciousness of our society, you start getting senior citizen discounts at IHOP when you turn 55. So old age begins at the age of 56 with Saturn, the old man of the heavens, and ends at the age of 63. Samael says, I do not want to say that necessarily at 63 we must all die, but rather that the first cycle of Saturn properly begins at 56 and ends at 63. Now listen to this, because it has been written, how is it that time humbles us? It has happened to everyone before us, and it will happen to you as it happens to me. At 20 years of age, a man is a peacock. At 30, a lion. At 40, a camel. At 50, a snake. At 60, a dog. At 70, a monkey. At 80, only a voice and the shadow. It has been written, time reveals all things. It's a very interesting charlatan that speaks for itself, even when nothing is being asked of it. Old age lowers the pride of men. But there's nothing wrong with that. The tragedy, the greatest tragedy of the old lies not on the very fact of being old, but in the foolishness of not wanting to recognize that they are old, and in the stupidity of believing themselves to be young as if old age were a crime. It is important that we work on eliminating those things that are inferior within us, here and now. Because if we don't, as an intellectual animal, we have proven that we do not get better with age. As a matter of fact, as a civilization, we have proven that as humans, we are not better now than what we were before. The heart of the intellectual animal does not become better with the years, but rather worse. It always turns to stone, and if in youth we were greedy, liars, and angry, in old age we're going to be so much more so. And that person that decided to sacrifice the rest of their lives to spend it with us, should they choose to be so compassionate, they will have to endure all of that cruelty. No. We must work to exercise an internal transformation. And the only way to reach perfect old age is by dissolving the psychological self. By seeking to make a transition into that next life with the least amount of anger left, with the least amount of resentments left, with the least amount of lust, with the least amount of greed and envy and pride and gluttony and laziness as possible. Because these are the actions, getting rid of all that. These are the actions that set us truly free. And that way we can grow to become gray-haired in wisdom, to become an old man in knowledge, to become a beacon of light, to transform internally, to become a truly Gnostic arat, an adept, a master of wisdom, an embodiment of perfect expression, of perfect wisdom, and perfect love. And so, for those of you young ones who are listening, children have no right to judge their parents. Nobody's perfect in this world, and those of us who do not have certain defects in one direction, we have them in another. So those who behave like this in life, they have not entered the path yet. Time and life will find a way to always humble us. Let's work together with these cosmic forces that exist here with us, here and now, so that we can exercise this transformation. Because the best thing about old age is that we all get very close to the goal. Dear friends, this is what we wanted to share with you. This is what we wanted to share with you tonight. This has been the planets and you, how planets shape our personality. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Everyone, have a good night. May all beings be happy.